Welcome to Come and See, your podcast for finding truth in a world of chaos. Brought to you by All for Jesus Living Waters Ministry. With host and founder Richard Case and co-host and retreat leader Cathy Weisenburger. Today is our special guest day, where we will hear from a friend of the ministry who will share their insight and stories on truth in this chaotic world. And now your host, Richard Case.
Well, good morning. This is guest day, and we have Neal Weisenburger from Chicago, Illinois, who's actually, I don't think that's Chicago. Where are you, Neal?
We are, well, right now I am in Union Pier, Michigan, which is only about an hour and 15-minute drive away from Chicago. So it's our little retreat. We call it Sanctuary House. And we're here in the woods and about a 10-minute walk to the beaches of Lake Michigan. So it's our little paradise.
Nice. Got to know Cathy. I got to know Neal. Linda and I shared our story about Park Community Church up in Chicago.
Yes, I remember that.
And when we became senior pastors there, interim senior pastors, Neal was one of the people that we got to know. And at the time we met him, he was single. And he can share a little bit about his story about praying through, and he got married. Linda and I married he and Cathy in Chicago.
Excellent.
And how many years have you been married now, Neal?
17 and a half now.
Wow. Yeah, beautiful, fantastic. So we were a part of that, and then Neal and Cathy have continued to grow together, and they're actually leaders in Living Waters that do retreats actually at your Michigan house there. So that's pretty exciting. So Neal, to have you share a little bit about your background, how did you personally come to know Christ?
Yeah, so that goes all the way back to high school, age 14. I was involved in a Campus Life Youth for Christ group at my high school. I grew up in a kind of more of a rural farming community in Northwest Ohio, and went to the same school under the same roof, kindergarten through 12th grade.
Wow. You don't hear that often.
A very big roof, but had 82 kids in my graduating class. And I would say when I was in high school, probably 40% of the student body was going to Campus Life Youth for Christ meetings. So I grew up in a more of a mainline denominational church setting that was quite honestly kind of boring. Get a lot out of it. The messages basically on a Sunday were, be a good person and you're going to go to heaven type messages.
Yeah.
But yet there was something deep down inside me, even as a child, that longed to know God. And I remember being, I don't know, 6, 7 years old maybe, and just before I was going to sleep one night, just talking to God and just telling him that I wanted to see Jesus face to face. So even from a young age, I just feel like I've had a spiritual hunger for spiritual truth and God. So it wasn't until I would say, when I was in high school, age 14, through Campus Life Youth for Christ, that they started talking more about the Bible and the salvation message, and it was something that resonated with me. And so we had a special event, which was a burger bash where we just like grilled out hamburgers and stuff at a friend's house who lives near the woods and stuff. And I just remember afterwards I was kind of in the woods, and I don't know, I was just sitting down against the base of a tree, and one of my classmates came up to me and they said, well, where are you going? I said, well, I'm going home after this. Where are you going? And I was like, and I knew what the answer to that, what the meaning of that question was. Where was I going in terms of eternity? And it just led me to just like really start contemplating that question while I'm sitting there at the base of this tree. And that's when I prayed and asked God to take control of my life. And so that was kind of how it happened. I will say that the remaining time I spent in high school, I would say that I didn't really start growing spiritually. That didn't happen until I went to university. I went to Miami University in Oxford, Ohio for my undergraduate studies, and they had some really strong campus ministries there. And it was pretty much through some of the campus ministries I got involved with that really started, seeing the importance of spiritual disciplines, being in the Word of God, in prayer and worship, those sorts of things. So I would say really my spiritual growth really started taking off during my university years.
Oh, that's great. What did you study in undergraduate?
Yeah, so I always had an interest in international things, and this also goes back to high school. I had an amazing French teacher who brought a lot of the culture into the classroom, in addition to studying the language. And so one of the things that she did was she sponsored 5-week study tours of Europe.
Mm.
So I really wanted to go on one of those trips. So I got a job at a local restaurant and I saved every paycheck and paid for that trip out of savings. And so I did 5 weeks in Europe, 10 countries. It just really opened up like such a new world to me, growing up in the middle of, cornfields and pastures with black Angus steers around me, and in these major, amazing, beautiful cities, of Europe, and seeing the architecture, learning about the history and the culture, and it really fascinated me. So I decided I wanted to study something international along international lines in university. So my undergraduate degree is in international studies with a focus on Western European studies. I also wound up coming just 2 hours short of a French degree as well.
Oh, wow.
Are you
Uh,
fluent in French then?
I was,
Okay.
not so much now. A little more difficult to practice, but I did. One of the things that I didn't mention is, as part of my studies, I did transfer out of Miami University for my junior year, and I did a junior year abroad program at the American University in Paris.
Ah,
Oh, excellent.
When I lived in Paris that year, it got to the point where I was dreaming in French, I was thinking in French, so I really had a really good handle, I believe, on the language. But
Mhm.
where I do continue to have an opportunity to use my French today is mostly in some missions work that I've been doing, particularly in the country of Haiti.
yeah.
Mm.
So I've, been down to Haiti. I think it's been now 8 times since the earthquake, the main earthquake back in 2010. And they, the official language of Haiti is French. You know, so a lot of the people speak French. They speak Creole, which is kind of a version of French and some West African language. So I've never had an issue communicating with the locals when I go.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, so that's little did I know that my French would be used, for humanitarian, relief, post earthquake in a pretty bad country like Haiti.
Yeah. Well, tell us then, how did you wind up in Chicago? And then how did you meet Cathy and decide to get married? And you can tell us a little bit about Cathy, her career. She's she's a orthodontist, so she's
Mm-hmm.
straightening out teeth today. So she couldn't join us. We'll have her back on. But once you tell us that story, how did that go?
Yeah, so I wound up coming to Chicago due to a job transfer. So I guess maybe for the benefit of your audience, my whole career that I chose after I graduated is in international banking.
Yeah.
So I've done a combination of, mostly it's been financing international trade transactions, um, with U.S. based companies that are importing or exporting. But I've also had about 9 years of experience as well in international treasury management, where I worked for a couple different global banks, setting up bank accounts around the world for their subsidiaries, and handling all of their international payments and collections, and investing excess cash, those sorts of things. So it's been a really rewarding career. Particularly, I got to actually do something that I actually studied, I would say. So, because I also went on and got I have an MBA as well in international management.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
so I was actually working for a bank in Detroit, Michigan at the time before I moved to Chicago, and they had an office in Chicago. And so I had an opportunity to transfer to the local office in Chicago. And moving to Chicago, I was familiar with a couple different churches before I moved. One being Park Community Church, and the other was actually a church up in Evanston, Illinois. And so I kind of had the decision to make. Do I want to live in the suburbs or do I want to live in the city? And I'm
Right.
like, well, in an amazing city like Chicago, I want to live in the city.
Yeah.
Being a single guy at the time as well. So, so I started going to Park Community Church, and it was a rather interesting church in the sense that I had many friends like, oh, do they have a singles group at Park Community Church? And I'm like, no, largely because we were probably 80%.
Single. They were the singles group. The church was the singles group.
So I would tell people, it's like, yeah, we don't have a singles group, but we do have a married couples group. So it really actually was a really good place for me to land because I didn't know anybody when I first moved to Chicago. I didn't have one friend that had lived there. And so it gave me an opportunity to meet a lot of people, make a lot of friends. It was a really good, source of community and a point of engagement for me. So, so I had met Cathy, my wife, very early on after I moved to Chicago. I'm going to guess it's probably about 25 years ago. And but we kind of had some different social circles, and I mean, I knew her name. I knew enough that if I passed her in the hallway at church, I'd be like, hey Cathy, how you doing? And there's that kind of a connection, if you will.
Yeah.
More acquaintance than anything at that point.
Exactly. So so anyways, fast forward a number of years, and we had a common friend, Abby Jill, who basically thought that we would be good together. So she approached me about if I would have any interest in getting to know Cathy, and so I never felt comfortable like with matchmaking situations because I always felt there was this pressure to perform and to make something happen. And so I told her like, we'll just take it easy, let's just organize some kind of a small brunch after church one Sunday and invite a few people. So so we did that, and I just had an opportunity to sit next to Cathy, and so we talked a lot. And then this was kind of funny. She asked me if I would be interested in going to a fundraiser for a local community shelter. And so I said, yeah, that sounds like fun. And so she said she had a few other people that were going to go. So then then what happened was at the last minute, everybody else bailed, and we had such a fun time, and that we went. I dropped her off at her house afterwards, and so we talked about, well, let's get together again. And so I had a fairly busy travel schedule, a lot of it being work related, and she had some travel stuff going on, and so we basically like put down, I think, I don't know, 2 or 3 different dates to get together at some point over the next month or so, kind of thing. So yeah, so that's how we've started hanging out and getting to know one another. And I had never really dated much as a single guy, largely because a church I was involved with shortly out of college was rather it was just not a good place in a lot of ways. I mean, in some ways it was really good, but there were some toxic elements to this church. And one of the things that I was told as a single man is that, dating is not biblical. So, so I'm just a young guy who's loving God and wanting to, do the right thing. And so I was misled in a lot of ways by the leadership of that church. And I never dated because to get married, I had to get a word from God. And then I had to submit that, for a particular single woman. And then I had to submit that to the leadership in the church, and they would either yay it or nay it kind of thing. Right. So anyway, so I never got my word. And so by the time I exited that church and moved to Detroit, I was getting into my, I was probably around 34, something like that, and never dated. And so the church I wound up in Troy, Michigan was, was a great church, and it was a very healing place for me in many ways. And they had an awesome like singles group there, and I made so many great friends. And I was kind of like looking around me, and I'm kind of like, wow, there's like normal people here.
Mm.
And so anyway, so I spent probably around 3 years in the Detroit area before moving to Chicago. So, so here I am, and I'm at the point where I'm busy in my career. I've got a lot of friends, and I'm content at this point in my singleness. And so anyway, so I tell that story because early on when Cathy and I were dating, I basically confessed to her that I'm a dating moron. If I say something, I don't say something. Don't necessarily, take that at face value. Just come to me and talk to me, and let's, if there's anything that you have concerns about or what have you. So anyway, so she was very gracious and very patient with me, I would say, during our dating process. But it got to a point, though, where I knew that, we had dated long enough that I knew that we either needed to take that next step, or we needed to somehow graciously kind of move our own, on our own separate paths. So at that point, I actually engaged Rich, and I sat down in a meeting with him, and I asked him, I said, well, hey, Rich, I'm like, I've been dating this girl, Cathy, and it's going pretty well. And, but it's at that point where like it needs to either take the next step toward marriage, or, we need to part our ways. And so he's like, well, so how's it going? I'm like, it's going really well. He's like, so what's the problem? I'm like, yeah, you're right. So I think I just needed a confirmation of that from somebody in my life, that I respected. And so Rich played that role, for me, that sounding board, and which I'm still, obviously today very grateful for. But so then we started going through some premarital counseling with Rich and Linda, and as Rich had mentioned earlier, he wound up performing our wedding ceremony 17 and a half years ago.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
Tell them a little bit. You had such a unique venue when we did your wedding. Tell a little bit about that, because that was really cool.
Yeah. So we actually the ceremony itself was at an old church on LaSalle Street in downtown Chicago called LaSalle Street Church.
Yep.
It's an old kind of a gray stone, beautiful architecture, on the outside. So that's where we had our ceremony. And then we had our reception at the 311 South Wacker building, which is right next to the Willis Tower.
Yeah, Sears, the old Sears Tower, what they call the Sears Tower.
Oh, wow.
110 stories high. So.
Mm.
So the space where we had our reception was a winter garden atrium in this office tower, probably around, I don't know, this has to be maybe a 60 to 70 story office tower. And so it has had all these, live palm trees in there, and it had this huge like water fountain feature and whatnot. And
it sounds beautiful.
It was a really, really great place for our wedding reception. And there was a restaurant on site there, so they did all the catering for the meal, and we had I think a 12-piece band that played.
Yeah.
So it was really fun. But I'd say probably one of the most memorable parts of it was when they introduced us. They introduced us as we rode down the escalator.
You're right.
Oh,
In the
that's
lobby.
great.
In the lobby, it was really spectacular. I remember that. I can still remember that. I can still picture that. It was such a cool time. Well, tell us a little bit about Cathy. She's an orthodontist. Tell her about her practice. Yeah.
So Cathy's, she's been in this practice a long time. She's a partner. She has a senior partner in the practice as well still. So it's in one of the suburbs, a suburb of Chicago called Oak Lawn.
Mm-hmm.
So what's interesting about her story and how she chose her career is that when she was growing up in one of the Chicago suburbs, her next door neighbor is who her senior partner is.
Oh, you're kidding. Oh, that's great.
Babysit his kids, and you know, and she knew at a fairly young age that she wanted to become an orthodontist. So she actually started working in the practice when she was 16 years old, working as a dental assistant,
Wow.
a couple days a week kind of thing. And so then she went on to University of Illinois for her undergrad, and University of Illinois Chicago for dental school, and then Loyola University for her orthodontics school. So, but yeah, she absolutely loves what she does, and she's brilliant and one of the smartest people I know.
That's so sweet to
A
hear.
little side note. My dad was a dentist oral surgeon, and he graduated Neal from the University of Illinois Chicago.
Mm.
They're a lot felt.
Yeah, so it's really really interesting. And I worked, interesting enough, as a dental assistant, and I would go to surgery with my dad because he was a specialist in doing these very difficult cases in oral surgery
Mm-hmm.
for people. And I would go to surgery with him because he wanted me to become a surgeon.
Take over the
And
family practice, family
yeah,
business.
and blood didn't bother me at all. So I went and evaluated it and looked at it, and basically, for my personality, as opposed to Cathy's, who's extremely detail oriented like my dad. Um, my approach to surgery would be, oh, that's close enough, good enough. My dad said, no, that's not going to work too well. So hey, son, go do something else. You're not going to make it as a surgeon. But a dentist is a pretty neat life, so it's beautiful because she does have time off, and you guys kind of organize it so you can go up to Michigan, right, for your weekends.
Yes, yes, it's so close of a drive for us to get here from Chicago. It's like about an hour and 15 minutes with good traffic, and so it's really conducive to spending weekends here, and even being able to spend Sunday evenings and get up and drive back for jobs on Mondays.
Right.
Mm.
Because there's an hour time difference that's kind of in our favor, going back. So yeah, it's a blessing.
Yeah.
Oh, you crossed the timeline going back. Oh, that is kind of convenient, right?
Yeah. So tell us about your. Kathy and I have talked about abiding. What does that look like for you? What specifically? How do you abide and process through listening and hearing and following God? And then we'll talk separately about you two coming to understand God's will through unity and taking step by step. We'll talk about that in a second. But first of all, just talk about your relationship with God. How does that work in terms of your intimacy and abiding?
Yep. I would say that the time that we've spent through Living Waters, just processing a lot of what Rich and Linda have shared with us over the years has been very revolutionary, I would say, for my
Mm.
walk. There was a point where, earlier in my Christian walk, a lot of, I would say, my relationship with God, it was more in the head,
Mhm.
Yeah.
right, as opposed to in the heart.
Mhm.
And to me, that's a huge difference, because when you talk about having a relationship with God, I mean, a relationship is not something that's intellectual. It's emotional, it's interactive. So I would say too that, so as a result of that, when I would look at how I would approach my time in the Word of God, it was more of an intellectual exercise, I would say.
Yeah.
I'll be very honest with you. To me, it was very dry.
Yeah.
Mm.
And it was kind of like I wouldn't get a whole lot out of it. It was obligatory.
Kind of checking the box.
Yeah. It's like, I know that I'm supposed to be doing this.
Mm-hmm.
So it was very much work oriented rather than, I just want to spend time with Jesus,
Mm.
and so I would say one of the things that, so we went through the Abide retreat that Rich and Linda offered. I think, Rich, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we were part of maybe the original Abide retreat in Napa.
That was one of the, when we come back to start, we had done them in Europe several years in a row, and then we started, through God instructing us, we'll start doing them in the United States. One of the first ones we did was in Napa.
I mean,
So how many years ago was that? Any idea?
That would have been right after they got married. A little bit right after they got married.
Probably 2005, 2006,
Yeah.
maybe.
Wow.
Yeah, and Neal's a wine connoisseur. Partly we got out of his European work, as he
Mm-hmm.
he learned how to really enjoy good wine and taste it and teach us. So he actually was part of that. But we went to a vineyard, Opus One, when we went out there and did this abiding retreat in Napa with Opus One. And yeah, you were part of that group. It was and Denny Weinberg was part of that group. So
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Is that the first retreat Denny was at as well?
Denny had gone to a European retreat.
Oh, that's right.
Where
Okay.
he had learned how to. Uh, God had to work with him on Christ clutter in the calendar because he ran into a wall out there. But yeah, he came up to Napa, and he's the one that knew the vine dresser at Opus One. Got us in there.
Oh,
So
really?
yeah, it
Okay.
was pretty cool.
That's excellent.
That retreat was really instrumental for me. I mean, we would spend the morning kind of just spending time in the Word and studying the concepts about abiding, particularly John chapter 15.
Yeah.
And then in the afternoon, we had on a couple days we had some tours set up at some local wineries in Napa Valley, and just going through the tours and hearing like the winemaker talk about everything they do in the vineyard to do nothing but to try to create the most optimal fruit
Right.
that they can.
Mm.
And just giving very examples about how they do that. And it just, to me, it was like it gave so much more insight into what we were studying in the mornings.
Yeah.
God. So I'll give you an example. Like one of the winemakers talked about how they don't irrigate their vines, and because it's more of a drier climate out in Napa, the vines, they like to stress the vines, from a water standpoint, because when the vine, but not overdo it, right? To the point where it kills the vines.
Yeah.
Because during the time when they're being stressed, the roots of the vine are going deeper down through the rocky soil, trying to find water, and to sustain itself, right? So I mean, that would be like one example, right? That like totally like I was like, wow, that's like so amazing, because like how many times do I get undergo stress in my life, and are my roots going down deeper
Right.
during, right?
That's good.
So anyways, so I would say, the difference, I would say, for me, after going through the whole Abide retreat, was my whole approach to spending time in the Word of God went from an obligatory thing to I'm on a treasure hunt.
Yeah.
So it's like, so now, like when I go to the Word of God, it's like, oh wow, I know that God can speak to me through His Word. So, what's God going to show me today? What's He going to speak to me today? And it's to me, there's an excitement now, and it's life-giving time to me now, rather than just being something that's just an exercise in futility.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's beautiful.
Yeah. For me, that was revolutionary.
Yeah.
Rich, the other thing that was very revolutionary for me was your teaching on the covenant.
Right.
to me, that was super foundational, to know what God's story is with mankind,
Yeah.
and we're part of that story, and to see how I fit into that story. And
Mm-hmm.
to me, that was so foundational. I mean, I've heard teachings on the covenant in the past, but nothing to the extent where it was like woven like Old Testament into the new covenant,
Mm-hmm.
and who I am in Christ today, and what God's promises are to me through his covenant. And I can stand on those promises. It's
Yeah.
like standing on a rock.
Right. How is
What
that?
about
Go ahead, Cathy.
I was just going to say, as a business guy, what is your, for other businessmen listening and thinking, I want to be spending time that feels alive in God's word. And we spend a lot of time talking about abiding, but what does it look like for you? How do you carve out? Is there a certain time you like to do it? Do you enjoy the journaling process more? Do you do things, do you like the cross-referencing? What's a way that it comes alive to you?
Yeah. So to me, abiding is it's while spending time in the Word is obviously important.
Mm-hmm.
There's more to abiding than just that.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's it's prayer. It's just
Mm-hmm.
in communal contact with God, just having him in my thoughts, just
Mm-hmm.
the day. For me also, just spending time in worship. I'm very much inspired by worship music, and
Mm-hmm.
at Park Community Church I was part of the worship team there, so
Yeah.
that kind of comes a little bit more naturally to me perhaps than maybe others, but God, just to me, it's like there's just something about just being able to sing praises to God,
Mm-hmm.
and in that regard, really helps me draw really near to God.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's a combination of all three practices.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously it can be hard, at times to get in the time, and I'm not saying that I'm 100, I'm not the best example of doing it right all the time, you know, but when I do, it's like it's just
Mm-hmm.
so fruitful, and you know, yeah, we have this this choice to walk in the spirit or walk in the flesh, or be in the kingdom or
Mm-hmm.
and it's so easy to get distracted sometimes, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
by busy schedules, by um, it, just the craziness of life, and so I always kind of have a good bellwether of whether I'm really abiding or not, because
Mm-hmm.
if I'm not walking in peace and joy, I know that something's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty good indicators, I think.
Yep. Yep.
And so it's just a matter of when I do come to that realization that I haven't been abiding like I should. So, but
Mm-hmm.
it's always that choice of wanting to step back into it, right? And
Right.
knowing that I have a loving Father that's just like welcoming me back.
Yeah. And I love even that you highlight that it's not, abiding isn't, like from what your background, there was so much of a checklist involved. Instead, it's more of a 24/7 intimacy that you're weaving in word, worship, and prayer throughout your day, throughout things that you're going in. And yes, there's specific time to be spent hearing from him in his word, but there's so much more depth to it throughout the day as well, that's an important element.
So another thing that this is kind of funny, but like one thing that during when I get caught up in the busyness of my workday, right? One thing that I employed pretty successfully is there was an app that I found called Mind Jogger.
Mm.
Every so often, it would like my phone will chime, right? So that jogs my mind to turn my thoughts toward God.
Oh, I love that. What a great idea.
And I've also used it to like to whenever I hear the the chime or whatever, it also reminds me like well, what can I thank God for in my life, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's always kind of a reminder to be thankful on a regular basis too.
Yep.
Mm.
Yep. And as you've described the importance of the covenant, um, talk about that relative to you and Cathy seeking God's will, and how do you approach it out of the covenant to then get to specifics. Cathy and I, in our discussion, have been talking about step by step. It gets too specific. It's not generic. It starts with promise, covenant, but it goes too specific. How do you two receive that, and how do you process that?
Yeah, so I think probably one of the biggest relationship killers is selfishness,
Mm.
right? Where I'm going my way and Cathy's maybe going her way. And so to me, the whole aspect of unity is really key to have a healthy marriage.
Yep.
It means dying to self
Mm-hmm.
and our own desires. And so that to me has probably been, I would say, one of the keys to our having a good and happy marriage is we always are looking out for the other person's interest above our own. So I think, so when it comes to like, a key decision, that you have to make, I mean, and Rich, this is something that we learned from you early on too. It's like, we have to come to a point of neutrality.
Right.
Mm.
Right?
Yep.
And that's part of, bearing our cross, if you will, in my opinion, where we're crucifying our own desires, our own self will, for the betterment of, of the unity of the marriage. So, but I think, if you're making decisions, key decisions in your marriage that are impacting, both husband and wife, it's like unity is so key.
Mm. Absolutely.
Yeah. And do you have any examples of how that's worked for you guys in terms of how you've approached it, and how did you process that to come to God's will?
Yep. So, so we're currently going through we're trying to sell our home in downtown Chicago.
Mm.
So very early on, in our marriage, Cathy's like, you tell me when, when you want to move to the suburbs, because there's one particular suburb that my wife has wanted to live in for a very, very long time. And it's a beautiful place. And so anyways, but I'm just like, I'm a city guy. So it's kind of like, she's kind of has this dream to go to the suburbs. I'm kind of like, well, my whole life's in the city, right? It's like, if I move out to the suburbs, I might as well move to Iowa. Because it's like I don't know anybody out in the suburbs. It's like my entire relationship circle is in the city, and so 25 years, of relation
Mm-hmm.
and whatnot. So anyway, so we just got to that point where I don't know, we just started processing, because I'm probably a few years away from making a big transition in my career to doing something outside of international banking, and and what does that look like, and practically and financially and whatnot. So we both kind of prayed together about this decision. Should we put our house on the market? Should we make a move out to the suburbs where we could buy something very nice for a lot less money, kind of thing. And so I think we both just kind of went to neutrality and processed it, and kind of both came back with a peace, confirming that, yeah, this seems to be a right decision. So we still haven't sold our home yet, but this has been a little bit of a process. It's been kind of with COVID and everything, it's just been kind of not the normal market, if you will, for real estate in downtown Chicago. So but we're on a journey, and there's trying to find what the value is in the waiting game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and one of the things we talk about is in that process that is the invitation to intimacy, to continue to ask him questions. Okay, what about now? And what do you have? What's in this? And so that's going to be fun to hear how he leads you in the midst of this time period.
I've got a piece about it. I mean, yeah, it'd be great to
Mhm.
get on with our life, the next stage, but but I've got a real piece with kind of where we're at right now, and it's like, and I've got to trust that it's like God knows the bigger picture. I
Mhm.
see, and so he could be protecting us from ourselves at this point.
Yeah. And
Absolutely.
as you approach it, Talk about the step-by-step part of it, that you came to a unity, a confirmation, but now it's walking, what we call walking into the promise. Describe that step-by-step process that you and Cathy follow.
The walking into the promise.
Yeah, yeah. As you now have to look at decisions and ultimately, sell your house and then look for a new one and et cetera, et cetera. So you don't just say, well, God, take care of it and we'll see you later. How do you stay engaged in the process?
Yeah, it's a little bit of, that dialogue with God on a regular basis, right? It's like, okay, so like, okay, God, I'm like, today I'm like, I'm impatient, and confessing that, and, and like, so like, I need you to restore some peace to me because I'm not at peace right now.
Yeah.
And, so it's that ongoing interaction dialogue. And I mean, I need to do that. Cathy needs to do that too, and, we need to be talking about these things too. Like, well, how are you feeling about this? And, and how are you being impacted by that? And, so, and it's even, things like some of the decisions that we have to make too. And, about, well, should we do a price reduction? Should we, do this? And so, we're obviously working very closely with our realtor there and, kind of relying on her expertise in the market. So, but at the end of the day, it's, it's talking about what she's recommending and, and then discussing that and, coming to that point, to a point of unity. And, if we do have a difference of opinion, then, we need to talk it out and, dive a little deeper. Like, well, where's your heart at? And why are you thinking this? And where's my heart?
Yeah.
It's some of those kind of things.
Yeah.
It's communication, I think, along the way.
Yeah.
Is
beautiful. And Neal, what in your work right now, what are you actually doing? Who do you work for, and what are you actually doing in that work?
Yeah, so I work for Wells Fargo. I've been there for a little over 8 years. I'm working covering a lot of territory right now, actually. So I've got most of the upper Midwest stretching down into Kansas. About a little over a year ago, I had a colleague who retired, and so I picked up the states of Tennessee and Florida on top of that. And I'm focused on what we call middle market size companies. So think maybe, I would say in general, maybe 100 million to 2 billion in sales is kind of the target range of the companies that I'm working with. But so, I'm going out, I'm meeting with, a lot of the corporate executives at, the U.S. headquarters level and talking to them about their international trade needs and how does that impact their, I'm going to get technical here as a banker, but how does that impact your working capital? And how can we find solutions to mitigate risk, in cross-border trade, as well as have positive impact on a company's working capital, be it through collecting their receivables quicker or extending out their foreign payables to their vendors overseas, those sorts of things. So,
yeah. Oh, great. And you're enjoying it, I know, right?
Yeah, as much as one can enjoy corporate America.
Well, you get the privilege of kind of working remotely, right?
Yes. So, I always have had some flexibility in my job, even before COVID, but, with COVID, we're completely remote, and I'm still working remotely right now. So hence why I'm here in Michigan on a Monday, taking a little break from my workday.
Yeah.
That's not a bad office view you've got right there.
You might see the occasional deer pass behind me.
You get the bow and arrow out and get some venison and turkey, or probably not, right?
I'm not a hunter.
Okay. Well, Neal, we've really enjoyed having you and having you share your story of abiding, and you and Cathy and coming together. It's been wonderful to see God lead you together, and I know you have a really spectacular marriage. You guys have great joy together. great adventure coming up of all the things that are next, and God is leading you, and you're following. What a great example. So we just admire that and so appreciate that. So, and we're glad that you give it away. So thank you for being part of this, and we'll look forward to coming back and having Cathy join us. And she tell us her side of the story of how you guys process.
Absolutely.
How you dated. That was pretty fun. So we'll have you back. Thanks for coming. And Cathy, we have End Times Friday tomorrow.
Oh, excellent. Yes.
And then we pick up God's Will again next week. So we're excited for that. And Neal, have a great time there in Michigan. And tell Cathy we said hi, and look forward to seeing her soon.
Great to see you, Neal. Take care.
All right. See you soon.
Welcome to Come and See, your podcast for finding truth in a world of chaos. Thank you for joining us for today's episode of Come and See, your podcast for truth in a world of chaos. Brought to you by All for Jesus Living Waters Ministry. Send us your questions and comments, and tune in tomorrow for more answers to your personal questions about living life in God's truth. Remember, God's will is best and none better. His truth brings peace in this world of chaos.